The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late April 1878, and it changed everything. 3 lines of hurried script informing Fiona Turner that her father was dead and the ranch was drowning in debt she never knew existed. She stood on the dusty platform of Desdemona, Texas, clutching that piece of paper while the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and wondered how a life could collapse so completely in the span of a train ride. The town spread before her like a promise half-kept. Wooden buildings lined up along a single main street that looked like it had been carved out of the earth through sheer stubbornness. Wagons rolled past kicking up clouds of red dust, and somewhere a horse whinnied, the sound carrying sharp and clear in the dry air. Fiona was 22 years old, fresh from 3 years at a women's academy in Boston where she had learned French and watercolors, and absolutely nothing useful for surviving in West Texas. Her dark hair was already escaping its pins, her traveling dress was wrinkled beyond saving, and the single trunk at her feet contained everything she owned in the world. She had left Desdemona at 19, chasing dreams of refinement and culture, certain that the rough frontier town would never be enough for her. Her father had sold cattle to pay for her schooling, never complaining, writing her letters full of pride and encouragement. Those letters had painted a picture of prosperity and success, of a ranch running smoothly and a future secure. Every word had been a lie, or at least an omission, and now Thomas Turner was in the ground and she was standing here alone trying to figure out what came next. A man was watching her from across the street, leaning against a hitching post with the easy stance of someone who had nowhere particular to be. He was tall and lean, built like someone who spent his days in the saddle, with dark hair that brushed his collar and eyes that seemed to catch the light even from a distance. He wore dusty work clothes and a hat tilted back just enough to show his face, and there was something about the way he stood there that made Fiona lift her chin defensively. She had been back in town for all of 10 minutes, and already she could feel the weight of small-town scrutiny settling over her shoulders. The man straightened up and started walking toward her, his boots making soft sounds in the dirt. As he got closer, Fiona could see he was younger than she had first thought, maybe 25 or 26, with a face that was more interesting than handsome, all strong lines and sharp angles. He had the weathered look of someone who worked outdoors, but his eyes were kind, a warm brown that softened the severity of his features. "Miss Turner." His voice was low and pleasant, with the slight drawl that marked him as a native Texan. "I am Vincent Eldridge. I worked for your father." The past tense hit her like a physical blow. Worked, not work, because her father was gone and everything was different now. Mr. Eldridge. She managed to keep her voice steady, though it took effort. "I am afraid I do not know much about my father's business affairs." The letter I received was rather sparse on details. Vincent removed his hat, holding it respectfully in both hands. Up close, she could see the dust on his clothes, the lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun, the calluses on his hands. This was a man who knew hard work intimately. "Your father was a good man," he said quietly. "One of the best I ever worked for. I am real sorry for your loss." The simple sincerity in his words made her throat tighten. She had cried on the train, alone in her compartment with the landscape rushing past, but now she forced the tears back. There would be time for grief later in private. Right now she needed to understand what she was facing. "The letter mentioned debts," she said. "Can you tell me how bad it is?" Vincent glanced around, noting the curious looks from passers-by. "Maybe we should talk somewhere more private." "I can drive you out to the ranch, explain things on the way." Fiona hesitated. She did not know this man, but she recognized the name from her father's letters. Vincent Eldridge had been mentioned several times over the past year, always in the context of hard work and reliability. Her father had trusted him, and right now that was all she had to go on. "All right," she agreed. "Thank you." He loaded her trunk into a wagon with an ease that spoke of real strength, then helped her up onto the seat with a courtesy that seemed natural rather than affected. As they pulled away from the station, Fiona took a deep breath and tried to prepare herself for whatever came next. The ranch was 5 miles outside of town, and Vincent used the time to lay out the situation with a directness she appreciated. Her father had borrowed money 3 years ago to expand the herd, betting on good prices that never materialized. Then the winter had been harder than expected, and they had lost cattle. He had borrowed more to cover the losses, always believing the next season would turn things around. It never did. "How much?" Fiona asked, her hands twisted together in her lap. "Near about $8,000. Vincent kept his eyes on the road. "The bank is giving you 60 days to make payment or they will foreclose. $8,000 might as well have been $8 million. Fiona had maybe $200 to her name, saved from the small allowance her father had sent her. The impossibility of the situation pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. "What about the cattle? Can they be sold?" "There are maybe 200 head left," Vincent said. "At current prices, that might bring 3,000 if we are lucky. The land itself is worth something, but not near enough to cover what is owed. So it is hopeless." The word came out flat, drained of emotion. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the creak of the wagon and the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves. Then he said, "I do not believe in hopeless." Something in his tone made her turn to look at him. His jaw was set, his eyes fixed on the horizon with a determination that seemed almost fierce. "What do you mean?" "Your father, right before he passed, he told me about a deal he had been working on. There is a cattle buyer up in Fort Worth who needs a big delivery by the end of June. He is willing to pay premium prices because he has contracts with the Army and the railroads. Your father thought if we could gather enough cattle and drive them up there, we could clear the debt and have something left over. But you said we only have 200 head. "We do," Vincent agreed. "But there are wild cattle in the Breaks country to the west. Mavericks, unbranded and unclaimed. It is legal to round them up and brand them if you can catch them. Dangerous work, but possible. If we could gather another 300 head and make the drive to Fort Worth, we might just save the ranch." Fiona stared at him. "You are suggesting we round up wild cattle and drive them over 100 miles in less than 2 months. "I know it sounds impossible," Vincent said. "But I have been thinking about it since your father died, running the numbers, planning the logistics. It could work. It would take every bit of luck and hard work we could muster, but it could work." "Why?" The question burst out of her before she could stop it. "Why would you care? Once the bank forecloses, you will just find work somewhere else." Vincent pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her fully. In the fading light, his eyes were very dark, very serious. "Your father gave me a chance when nobody else would," he said quietly. "I had been drifting, getting into trouble, going nowhere fast. He hired me when I needed it most, trusted me when I had done nothing to earn it, and showed me that a man could be something better than what circumstances made him. I owe him more than I could ever repay, and the only way I know to honor his memory is to try to save what he built." He paused, then added, "Besides, it is not just about the ranch. There are 3 other hands who depend on this place for their livelihood. If the bank takes it, they are out of work. And you would lose your home, your inheritance, everything your father worked for. That does not sit right with me." Fiona felt something shift in her chest, a small crack in the numbness that had surrounded her since she received that terrible letter. This man, this stranger who owed her nothing, was willing to fight for something that most people would have already written off as lost. "You really think we can do this?" she asked. "I think we have to try." Vincent picked up the reins again, his expression softening slightly. "I know you just got here, and I know this is a lot to take in. You do not have to decide anything right now, but I wanted you to know there might be a way forward if you are willing to take the risk." They drove the rest of the way in silence, and when the ranch house came into view, Fiona felt her heart clench. It was a simple structure, built of local stone with a wide porch that her father had added when she was 10. She could remember sitting on that porch in the evenings, listening to him tell stories while the sun set over the hills. The barn stood off to one side, solid and weathered, and beyond it she could see the corrals where her father had taught her to ride when she was barely big enough to reach the stirrups. This was home. For all her dreams of culture and sophistication, for all the time she had spent in Boston learning to be a proper lady, this dusty ranch in the middle of nowhere was the place that held her memories, her history, her heart. Vincent helped her down from the wagon and carried her trunk inside. The house was clean but obviously neglected, the kind of tidiness that came from a man living alone without the time or inclination for real housekeeping. Fiona walked through the rooms slowly, touching familiar objects, seeing her father in every corner. His coat still hung by the door. His coffee cup sat on the kitchen table. It was like he had just stepped out and would be back any moment. "The hands and I have been taking turns looking after things," Vincent said from the doorway, "making sure nothing got damaged or stolen. We did not touch any of your father's personal belongings. That seemed like it should be up to you. Thank you." Fiona turned to face him, squaring her shoulders. "Mr. Eldridge, I want to try. I want to save the ranch. Tell me what needs to happen." A slow smile spread across Vincent's face, transforming it completely. For the first time, she saw genuine happiness there, and something else that looked almost like relief. "Well then, Miss Turner, I think we better get started." Over the next week, Fiona learned more about running a ranch than she had absorbed in her entire childhood. Vincent was a patient teacher, explaining everything from the basics of cattle behavior to the complexities of reading the land for water and grass. The other hands, a grizzled veteran named Sam Hayes, a quick-smiling Mexican vaquero called Carlos Mendez, and a young cowboy named Billy Watts who could not have been more than 19, all pitched in to help her understand what she was up against. The plan was ambitious to the point of absurdity. They would spend 3 weeks gathering the wild cattle from the Breaks country, dangerous work that required skill, courage, and a fair amount of luck. Then they would have to drive the combined herd over 100 miles to Fort Worth, arriving by the end of June to meet the buyer's deadline. It meant long days in the saddle, sleeping under the stars, and a dozen things that could go wrong at any moment. Fiona threw herself into preparations with a determination that surprised even her. She traded her fine dresses for practical work clothes, learning to sit a horse for hours without complaint and to handle a rope with something approaching competence. Her hands, so carefully softened during her years in Boston, developed blisters that hardened into calluses. Her face, which she had protected with parasols and wide-brimmed hats, darkened to a golden tan under the relentless Texas sun. And through it all, Vincent was there. He taught her to read the sky for weather, to spot the signs of water in the landscape, to understand the subtle language of cattle and horses. He was unfailingly patient, never making her feel foolish for not knowing things that seemed obvious to him. When she struggled to throw a rope correctly, he stood behind her and guided her arms through the motion until her muscles learned the rhythm. When she fell from her horse while trying to cut a steer, He was there immediately, helping her up and checking for injuries with a gentleness that made her breath catch. It was during one of these long days of preparation, as they were checking supplies in the barn while the afternoon sun slanted through the wooden slats, that Fiona found herself really looking at him for the first time. Vincent was coiling rope with quick, efficient movements, his attention focused on his work, and she noticed the strength in his hands, the way his shoulders moved under his shirt, the line of his jaw. He was, she realized with a small start, quite attractive in a rough, unself-conscious way that was nothing like the refined gentleman she had known in Boston. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up and caught her watching him. For a moment, neither of them moved and something passed between them, an awareness that had not been there before. Then Vincent cleared his throat and gestured to the supplies. "We should have enough to get us through the gather and the drive as long as we are careful," he said, his voice slightly rougher than usual. "I figure we will move the herd out on May 20th. That gives us just enough time to reach Fort Worth by the deadline." "Vincent," Fiona said, and realized it was the first time she had used his given name. Something flickered in his eyes, a quick flash of pleasure that he tried to hide. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why were you drifting before my father hired you?" "You said you were getting into trouble. What happened?" He was quiet for a long moment, his hands stilling on the rope. Then he set it aside and leaned against a post, his expression distant. "My father was a gambler," he said finally. "A good one when he was sober, which was not often. My mother died when I was young, and after that, he just kind of gave up on everything except cards and whiskey. We moved around a lot, staying one step ahead of his debts. I learned to fight, to steal when I had to survive any way I could. When I was 18, he got himself killed in a card game gone wrong, and I was alone." He paused, his jaw tightening at the memory. "I kept drifting, working odd jobs, getting into fights. I had a lot of anger in me and no good way to let it out. One night in a saloon, I started a brawl that nearly got someone killed. I ended up in jail, and when I got out, I swore I was going to change. But nobody wanted to hire a troublemaker with a reputation. I was about ready to give up, go back to the kind of life I had known when your father found me sleeping in his barn." "What did he do?" Fiona asked softly. Vincent smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "He woke me up, gave me breakfast, and offered me a job, just like that. No lectures, no conditions, just a chance. He said everyone deserved an opportunity to be better than their past, and he was willing to bet on me. That was 3 years ago, and I have been here ever since. He saved my life, Miss Turner. Not in some dramatic way, but in all the ways that really matter. He gave me purpose, stability, a place to belong. That is why I am willing to fight for this ranch, because it represents everything good that I have ever known." Fiona felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back, but not before Vincent saw. He pushed away from the post and took a step closer, his expression concerned. "I am sorry," he said. "I did not mean to upset you." "You did not," she assured him. "It is just, hearing you talk about him like that, it helps. I have been so angry at him for not telling me how bad things were, for letting me think everything was fine when it was falling apart. But hearing you describe the kind of man he was, remembering that side of him, it makes the anger feel less important." "He did not tell you because he did not want you to worry," Vincent said gently. "He was so proud of you, Miss Turner. He talked about you all the time, about how smart you were, how you were going to make something of yourself. He wanted you to have opportunities he never had, a better life than scratching a living out of this hard land. Maybe he made the wrong choice in keeping the truth from you, but it came from love." "Please," Fiona said impulsively, "call me Fiona. I think we are past formalities, do not you?" Vincent's eyes widened slightly, and she saw color rise in his cheeks. "That would not be proper, Miss Turner. I work for you." "Do you?" She stepped closer, emboldened by something she did not quite understand. "Because it seems to me we are partners in this venture. I could not do any of this without you, and you need my permission as owner to carry out the plan. That sounds more like a partnership than an employer-employee relationship." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Fiona," he said, testing the name. It sounded different in his voice, almost intimate. "All right, then. But only when it is just us. In front of the other men I should maintain proper respect." "Agreed," she said, and felt a smile tug at her lips. "Though I think it is ridiculous, this idea that using someone's name is disrespectful." "It is not about respect," Vincent said quietly. "It is about protecting your reputation. A woman alone with hired men, it can lead to talk. I do not want anyone thinking less of you because of familiarities that might be misinterpreted." The thoughtfulness of that, the care for her reputation and standing, touched her more than she wanted to admit. In Boston, the men she had known had been polished and well-mannered, but there had been a superficiality to it, a sense that they behaved correctly because it was expected rather than because they genuinely cared. Vincent's courtesy came from a deeper place, a real concern for her well-being that had nothing to do with social performance. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for caring about the ranch, for teaching me, for being honest with me. I know I have not been here long, but I already feel like I can trust you, and that means more than I can say." "You can trust me," Vincent said, his voice low and fervent. "I give you my word on that. I will do everything in my power to save this ranch and keep you safe." The intensity in his eyes made her heart skip a beat. They stood there in the dusty barn with the afternoon light making patterns on the floor, and Fiona felt the world narrow down to just the two of them. She wanted to say something, to acknowledge the strange pull she felt toward this man, but before she could find the words, they heard Sam calling from outside. The moment broke, and they stepped apart quickly. Vincent grabbed his hat and headed for the door, and Fiona followed, trying to calm her racing pulse. Whatever was happening between them, it was complicated and probably unwise. She had known him barely a week, and they were about to embark on a venture that would demand all their focus and energy. There was no room for romantic distractions, no matter how compelling. But as the days passed and they continued to prepare for the gather, Fiona found it harder and harder to ignore the way her pulse quickened when Vincent walked into a room, or the way her eyes sought him out even in a crowd. She noticed little things about him. The way he was always the first one up in the morning and the last to turn in at night, the gentleness with which he handled the horses, the patience he showed with young Billy, who was eager but inexperienced. She saw how the other men looked to him for guidance, how they trusted his judgment without question. And she noticed the way he looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention, a hunger in his eyes that he quickly shuddered whenever she caught him. It was the look of a man who wanted something he believed he could not have, and it made her ache in ways she did not fully understand. On the evening before they were set to head into the Breaks country, Fiona stood on the porch watching the sun set. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, the kind of spectacular display that happened only in wide open country where the horizon stretched forever. She heard footsteps behind her and knew without turning that it was Vincent. "Big day tomorrow," he said, coming to stand beside her at the railing. "I am terrified," she admitted. "What if I cannot do it? What if I slow everyone down or make a mistake that costs us everything?" "You will be fine," Vincent said with complete certainty. "You have worked hard, learned fast, and you have more grit than most men I know. Your father would be proud of you." The mention of her father brought a lump to her throat. I hope so. I keep thinking about all the time I wasted in Boston, learning things that do not matter when I could have been here with him. I keep wishing I could have one more conversation, one more chance to tell him I love him. He knew, Vincent said softly. Trust me, he knew. They stood in silence for a while, watching the light fade. Then Fiona said, "Can I ask you something? And will you give me an honest answer always?" She took a breath, gathering her courage. "Why did you really agree to help me? And do not say it is just about honoring my father's memory." "There is something else, is there not?" Vincent turned to look at her, and in the gathering dusk his eyes were very dark. For a moment she thought he would deflect, give her some polite non-answer. But then he said, "Do you believe in hope, Fiona?" The question surprised her. "I am not sure. I used to before I found out how bad things were. Now I am just trying to get through each day." "I believe in hope," Vincent said quietly. "I have to. Without it, I would still be that angry kid sleeping in barns and getting into fights. Hope is what kept me going when things were hard, what made me believe I could be better than my circumstances. And when your father died and I saw everything he built about to be lost, I felt that hope slipping away. Then you stepped off that train, looking scared but determined, and something in me just knew." "Knew what?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered for just a moment against her cheek, and she felt the calluses, the warmth of his skin. "Hope is what brought me to you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "The hope that maybe this impossible thing could work, that maybe I could save what your father built, and maybe, if I was very lucky, I could earn the right to stand beside you not as a hired hand, but as something more. I know I have no business saying any of this. I know I am not the kind of man you should be interested in. But you asked for honesty, and the truth is I have been falling for you since the moment you looked at me with those determined eyes and said you wanted to try to save the ranch." Fiona's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. She knew she should step back, maintain proper distance, remind him of all the reasons this was a bad idea. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch, her own hand coming up to cover his where it rested against her cheek. "Vincent," she breathed, "I do not know what I am doing. I do not know if any of this is wise or right. But I know that when I am with you, I feel less alone. I feel like maybe we really can do this impossible thing. And I know that I think about you more than I should, that I find excuses to be near you, that something about you makes me feel alive in a way I never have before." His other hand came up to frame her face, and he leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to refuse. But Fiona did not want to refuse. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted to feel something good amid all the fear and uncertainty. When his lips touched hers, it was gentle at first, tentative, a question more than a demand. She answered by pressing closer, her hands fisting in his shirt, and the kiss deepened into something that made her knees weak and her blood sing. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "We should not have done that," he said, but he did not sound sorry. "Probably not," Fiona agreed, "but I am not sorry. Neither am I." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "But Fiona, I meant what I said about protecting your reputation. If anyone found out, if there was talk, it could damage your standing in town. So maybe we should keep this between us, at least until we see if we can pull off this drive. After that, if we succeed, if the ranch is saved, then maybe we can figure out what this is and where it is going." She wanted to argue, to say that she did not care what people thought, but she knew he was right. In a small town like Desdemona, reputation mattered, especially for a woman. If word got out that she was romantically involved with one of her father's hired hands, it would be used against her, might even make it harder to do business. "All right," she said reluctantly. "We will keep it quiet for now. But Vincent, I need you to know that I do not see you as just a hired hand. I see you as a partner, as someone I am coming to care for very much. Whatever happens, that is the truth." He smiled, that rare full smile that transformed his face, and kissed her again, quick and sweet. "That is enough for me," he said. "That is more than enough." The next morning they rode out before dawn, heading west into the Breaks country. It was rough terrain, all deep gullies and rocky outcroppings, covered in thick brush that made riding treacherous. But it was here that the wild cattle hid, mavericks that had escaped from herds over the years, or were descended from old Spanish stock that had never been fully domesticated. The work was dangerous and exhausting. The cattle were wary and aggressive, and they had to be chased out of the thick cover, roped, and branded before they could be added to the growing herd. Fiona learned quickly that there was nothing romantic about this kind of work. It was all sweat and dust and muscle strain, long days in the saddle broken by brief, restless nights sleeping on the hard ground. But there was also a strange exhilaration to it. Every steer they managed to catch and brand was a small victory, a step closer to their goal. The men worked with a coordinated efficiency that spoke of long experience, and Fiona found herself caught up in the rhythm of it, her body learning to anticipate and react without conscious thought. Vincent was everywhere, always in motion, roping steers with a skill that seemed almost casual, directing the other men, checking on Fiona to make sure she was holding up. She saw a different side of him out here, the absolute competence with which he worked, the natural authority that made the others follow his lead without question. This was his element, and he moved through it with a grace that was almost beautiful. One afternoon, about a week into the gather, Fiona was cutting a stubborn steer out of a thick patch of mesquite when her horse stepped in a hole. The animal went down hard, and Fiona felt herself flying through the air. She hit the ground with a force that knocked the wind from her lungs and left her seeing stars. For a terrible moment, she could not breathe, could not move, and panic clawed at her throat. Then Vincent was there, his hands running over her arms and legs, checking for breaks. "Fiona, can you hear me? Are you hurt?" she managed to drag in a breath, then another. "I think I am all right, just had the wind knocked out of me. Do not move yet. Let me make sure." His hands were gentle but thorough, and his face was pale beneath the tan. When he was satisfied she had no broken bones, he helped her sit up slowly. "Your horse?" she asked. "Billy is checking him now. He looks all right, just startled. Fiona, you could have been killed. If you had landed wrong, if that steer had charged you while you were down." "But I did not, and it did not," she said, though her hands were shaking. "I am fine, Vincent." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, his face buried in her hair. She felt him trembling and realized he had been truly frightened. "I cannot lose you," he said, his voice muffled. "I cannot. You have to be more careful." "I am trying," she said. "But this is not exactly safe work for anyone." He pulled back, his hands gripping her shoulders. "Promise me you will not take unnecessary risks. Promise me you will think before you act." "I promise," she said, touched by the intensity of his concern. "I promise I will be careful." He stared at her for a long moment, then kissed her hard, a kiss that tasted of fear and relief and something deeper. When he released her, they were both breathing hard, and she was aware of the other men watching from a distance, their expressions carefully neutral. Vincent seemed to realize the same thing. He stepped back, putting proper distance between them, and his voice when he spoke was carefully professional. "Let us take a break. Make sure you are really all right before we continue." But that night, when the others were asleep around the campfire, he sought her out where she sat watching the stars. He did not say anything, just sat beside her and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. They stayed like that for a long time, drawing comfort from each other's presence, and Fiona thought that maybe she was beginning to understand what hope felt like. The gather took 3 weeks, just as Vincent had predicted. By the time they drove the combined herd back to the ranch, they had close to 500 head of cattle, enough to meet the buyers' requirements if they could get them to Fort Worth. Fiona was exhausted, covered in bruises, and more proud of herself than she had ever been. She had done this. She had worked alongside experienced cowboys and held her own. Whatever happened next, no one could take that away from her. They had only 2 days to rest and resupply before the drive would begin. Fiona used the time to take a proper bath, wash her clothes, and try to prepare herself mentally for what lay ahead. 100 miles might not sound like much, but on foot behind a herd of semi-wild cattle, it would feel like crossing the world. On the evening before they were set to leave, she found Vincent checking the supply wagon one last time. The sun was setting, painting everything in gold and rose, and for a moment she just watched him work, memorizing the way he moved, the concentration on his face. "We are ready," he said, noticing her. "As ready as we can be anyway." "Are you ever afraid," she asked, "that it will not work, that something will go wrong?" "All the time," he admitted. "But I have learned that fear is just another thing you have to work through. You do not let it stop you, you just acknowledge it and keep moving forward." She walked over to him, and even though they were in the open where anyone might see, she took his hand. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for believing this could work, for teaching me, for being patient with me, for giving me hope when I did not think I had any left." Vincent turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Fiona, no matter what happens, no matter how this ends, I want you to know something. These past weeks, working beside you, watching you grow stronger and more confident, it has been the best time of my life. You amaze me. Your courage, your determination, the way you refuse to give up even when things are hard. I am so incredibly lucky that hope brought me to you." Her eyes filled with tears, but they were good tears, the kind that came from feeling understood and valued. "I think I am the lucky one," she whispered. "I came back here expecting to find only loss and failure. Instead, I found purpose and strength, and I found you." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, a promise of things to come. And when they broke apart, Fiona felt ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring. The drive began on May 20th, just as planned. They moved the herd north, following old cattle trails that generations of drovers had used before them. It was slow going, maybe 10 or 12 miles a day if they were lucky, and every mile brought new challenges. The weather was unpredictable, swinging from blazing heat to sudden storms that turned the ground to mud and made the cattle restless. They had to cross rivers swollen with spring runoff, negotiate rocky passes where a single misstep could send a steer tumbling, and constantly watch for signs of illness or injury in the herd. But they were making progress, and that was what mattered. Vincent proved to be an excellent trail boss, making decisions quickly and confidently, adjusting their plans when circumstances demanded it. Sam's experience was invaluable, his knowledge of the land and cattle helping them avoid potential disasters. Carlos had a way with the horses that bordered on magical, keeping their remuda healthy and cooperative. And Billy, for all his youth, was tireless and eager, taking on whatever task was needed without complaint. As for Fiona, she found herself falling into the rhythm of the trail. The work was hard, the days were long, and she was constantly tired, but there was a satisfaction to it that she had never found in the drawing rooms of Boston. Out here, every action had direct consequences. You took care of your horse or you ended up walking. You watched the cattle or they scattered. You pulled your weight or everyone suffered. It was straightforward in a way that social etiquette had never been, and she discovered she preferred it. She also discovered that being constantly in Vincent's presence was both wonderful and frustrating. During the day, they maintained appropriate distance, interacting only as trail boss and owner. But at night, when the others were asleep and someone had to ride night watch with the cattle, they took turns keeping each other company. Those were the times when they really talked, sharing stories and dreams, learning each other in ways that went beyond the physical attraction. She learned that Vincent loved the land with a fierce passion, that he could read the sky and the wind like some men read books, that he had a surprisingly gentle sense of humor that emerged when he felt comfortable. She learned that he had educated himself, reading whatever he could get his hands on during the long winters, that he wanted to own his own place someday and build something lasting. And he learned about her, about the loneliness of being the only child of a widower, about her complicated feelings regarding her time in Boston, about her dreams of doing something meaningful with her life. She told him about the pressure to marry well, to use her education to secure a comfortable future, and how none of the men she had met in the East had sparked even a fraction of the feeling he inspired in her. "I think I was sleepwalking through my life," she said one night as they sat their horses on a rise overlooking the sleeping herd, going through the motions of what was expected without ever really feeling anything. Then I came back here and everything fell apart, and paradoxically that is when I started feeling alive. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Vincent said. Sometimes it takes losing everything to figure out what really matters. And what really matters? She asked, looking at him in the moonlight. This, he said simply. Being out here under the stars with honest work to do and people you care about, having a purpose, a goal worth fighting for, and having someone who sees you for who you really are and likes you anyway. "I more than like you," Fiona said softly. "I think I might be falling in love with you." She heard his sharp intake of breath, saw him turn to stare at her. "Fiona, you do not have to say anything," she said quickly. "I just wanted you to know, whatever happens, I wanted you to know that." He reached across the distance between their horses and took her hand. "I am already in love with you. I think I have been since that first day when you stood on the platform looking lost and scared but refused to let it defeat you. Every day since then, I have fallen deeper. You are everything I never knew I was looking for, everything I never thought I could have." Joy flooded through her, so intense it was almost painful. "Then, when this is over, when we have saved the ranch." "When we have saved the ranch," he said firmly, "I am going to ask you properly to marry me. I will do it right with a ring and everything. But Fiona, you should know what you would be getting. I am not a rich man. I do not have family or connections. All I have is a reputation for hard work and this dream of building something good. If you marry me, it will not be an easy life." "I do not want an easy life," Fiona said, her voice steady and sure. "I want a real life with someone who sees me as a partner, who respects what I can contribute. I want to build something meaningful and I want to do it with you." "Then that is what we will do," Vincent promised. "Together." They were 12 days into the drive when trouble found them. They had just crossed into the territory near Fort Worth when a group of riders approached. 6 men on good horses with an air of confidence that immediately put Vincent on alert. He signaled for the herd to keep moving while he rode forward to meet them, and Fiona, ignoring his gesture for her to stay back, rode up beside him. The leader of the group was a heavy-set man with cold eyes and an expensive hat. He looked at their herd with undisguised interest, then turned his attention to Vincent. "That is a fine-looking bunch of cattle," he said. "Where did you get them?" "Gathered them legal from the Breaks country," Vincent said evenly. "All properly branded and accounted for." "Is that so?" The man's smile did not reach his eyes. "Funny thing, some of those brands look awful fresh. Makes a man wonder if maybe you have been gathering cattle that did not belong to you." "Every steer in that herd is legal," Fiona said, her voice sharp. "We have bills of sale for our original stock and can account for every head we added. If you are accusing us of cattle theft, you better have proof." The man's eyes shifted to her, and she did not like what she saw there. "Well now, a woman trail boss. That is something you do not see every day. Maybe you do not know what your hands have been up to." "Miss Turner is the owner," Vincent said, his voice hard. "And I am the trail boss. We know exactly what we are doing and we have not broken any laws. So unless you have actual business with us, I suggest you move along." The tension stretched out, thick enough to cut. Fiona was aware of Sam and Carlos moving in closer, of Billy edging toward the rifle in his saddle scabbard. This could go bad very quickly. Then one of the other riders spoke up. "Frank, that is Vincent Eldridge. He used to work for the Bar T Ranch." "I know him. He is straight." Frank turned to look at the speaker, then back at Vincent. "That true? You work for Bar T, worked there 2 years ago," Vincent confirmed. "Before I came to work for Mr. Turner." Something shifted in Frank's expression. The hostility did not disappear, but it eased slightly. "Turner is dead." "Yes," Fiona said. "He was my father. I inherited the ranch and we are making this drive to pay off his debts. Now, are we going to have a problem here or can we be on our way?" Frank studied her for a long moment, then shook his head. "No problem, but you watch yourself. There are people who will not be as understanding about a woman trying to run a cattle operation. They will see it as an opportunity to take advantage." "Then they will learn differently," Fiona said coolly. "Good day, gentlemen." They rode off, and Fiona let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Vincent turned to her, his expression caught between irritation and admiration. "You should have stayed back like I signaled," he said. "They were questioning our legitimacy," she countered. "As the owner, it was my place to answer. Besides, I thought I did rather well." Despite himself, Vincent smiled. "You did. You were magnificent, but you also took a risk that could have gone very badly." "But it did not," she pointed out. "Because we are in the right, and we have nothing to hide." "Being in the right does not always protect you," Vincent said quietly. "But I understand your point. Come on, let us catch up to the herd." They reached the outskirts of Fort Worth on June 28th, 2 days ahead of schedule. The cattle were trail-weary but in good condition, and the buyer, a brisk businessman named Patterson, seemed pleased with what he saw. The negotiations took most of the day, with Vincent and Fiona working together to get the best possible price. In the end, they settled on a figure that was more than enough to clear the debt and leave a substantial sum for operating capital. When Patterson handed over the bank draft, Fiona stared at it in disbelief. They had done it. Against all odds, they had actually done it. The ranch was saved. She looked up to find Vincent watching her, his eyes bright with emotion. Without thinking, she threw her arms around him, hugging him tight while he laughed and spun her around. The other men cheered, and for a moment it did not matter that they were in public or that people were watching. They had accomplished something incredible together, and the joy of it overflowed all boundaries. That evening, they celebrated at a hotel restaurant, a rare extravagance that felt well earned. Fiona sat beside Vincent, her hand resting on his leg under the table where no one could see, and listened to the men rehash the high points of the drive. There was laughter and relief, and a bone-deep satisfaction that came from hard work successfully completed. Later, after the others had retired, Vincent walked Fiona to her room. They stood in the hallway, suddenly awkward now that the drive was over and decisions had to be made. "So," Vincent said. "We did it." "We did," Fiona agreed. "The ranch is saved. I can pay off the bank and there will be enough left over to restock and make improvements." "That is wonderful." He hesitated, then said, "I suppose you will want to head back to Desdemona soon, get everything settled." "I suppose," she said, studying his face. "Vincent, what is wrong? We won. We should be celebrating." "We are celebrating," he said. "But now that the drive is over, I have to wonder if anything else changes too. Out on the trail, it was easy to forget the differences between us. But now we are back in civilization, and you are a ranch owner and I am a hired hand, and maybe you have had time to think about what you said and changed your mind." Fiona stared at him, then grabbed his hand and pulled him into her room, shutting the door behind them. Propriety be damned, they needed to have this conversation in private. "Listen to me," she said fiercely. "Nothing has changed. I meant every word I said. I love you, Vincent Eldridge, and I want to build a life with you. Not because you work for me, not despite it, but because you are the best man I have ever known. You are smart and capable and kind, and you see me as an equal. Do you have any idea how rare that is, how precious?" "Fiona, I do not have anything to offer you," he said, his voice rough. "No money, no property, no, you have yourself," she interrupted. "That is all I want. That is everything. I do not care about money or social position. I care about building something real with someone I respect and admire and love. And that is you." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "I love you," he said against her hair. "God, I love you so much. I just want to do right by you, to be worthy of you." "You are already worthy," she said. "You were worthy the moment you decided to fight for something you believed in, even when everyone else would have given up. Vincent, I need you to understand something. I do not want you to work for me anymore. I want you to work with me, as my partner in business and in life. The ranch should be ours together. Will you do that? Will you marry me and build this life with me?" He pulled back to look at her, his eyes wide. "Did you just propose to me?" "I suppose I did," she said, feeling suddenly uncertain. "Is that all right?" "I know it is not traditional, but nothing about us is traditional, so I thought." He kissed her, cutting off the words, and it was different from the kisses they had shared before. This was a claiming, a promise, a joining. When they finally broke apart, they were both trembling. "Yes," he said, his voice hoarse. "Yes to everything. Marrying you, being your partner, building a life together, all of it. Yes." She laughed, giddy with relief and joy, and kissed him again. They stood there in the lamplight, holding each other, and Fiona thought about the letter that had brought her back to Texas, the father she had lost, the desperate gamble they had taken. All of it had led to this moment, to this man, to this improbable happiness. "We should get a ring," Vincent said eventually. "A proper ring. I know I do not have much money, but I have some saved, and tomorrow," Fiona said, "we will find a ring tomorrow. Tonight I just want to be here with you." They talked for hours, making plans and dreaming aloud about the future. They would expand the ranch, build it into something even better than what her father had created. They would work side by side, partners in every sense of the word. Maybe someday they would have children who would grow up knowing both the refinement of civilization and the raw beauty of the frontier. They would create something lasting, something good. When Vincent finally left to return to his own room, both of them aware of the proprieties even as they bent them, Fiona lay in bed feeling more content than she could remember. She had come to Texas expecting to close a chapter of her life. Instead, she was beginning a new one, and it was better than anything she could have imagined. They returned to Desdemona 3 days later, stopping at the bank first thing to settle her father's debts. The banker, a severe man named Henderson who had written the foreclosure notice, looked surprised when they walked in with a bank draft for the full amount plus interest. "Miss Turner," he said, standing to greet them. "I did not expect to see you, I assumed." "You assumed the ranch would be foreclosed," Fiona finished calmly. "But as you can see, we have made other arrangements. Here is payment in full for my father's debts. I would like a receipt and a clear title to the property." Henderson examined the bank draft carefully, then looked up with grudging respect. "You made the drive to Fort Worth. I heard rumors, but I did not quite believe them. How did you manage to gather enough cattle in time?" "With hard work and good people," Fiona said, glancing at Vincent. "And a refusal to give up." As they left the bank an hour later, free and clear, Fiona felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The ranch was truly hers now, saved from debt and ready for a new beginning. She and Vincent walked down the main street of Desdemona, and she noticed people watching them, whispering. Let them talk, she thought. She was done caring about what people thought. They stopped at the general store to pick up supplies, and the proprietor, a friendly woman named Mrs. Chen, congratulated them on the successful drive. "The whole town has been talking about it," she said. "A woman trail boss, and making that drive in time to meet your deadline. That is quite an accomplishment, Miss Turner." "It was a team effort," Fiona said. "I could not have done it without good hands and a lot of luck." "I heard you are keeping your crew on," Mrs. Chen continued, packing their purchases. "That is good. They are fine men, especially Mr. Eldridge here. Your father thought the world of him." "So do I," Fiona said, meeting Vincent's eyes. "In fact, I have an announcement. Mr. Eldridge and I are engaged to be married. He will be my partner in running the ranch." Mrs. Chen's eyes went wide, then she broke into a huge smile. "Well, that is wonderful news. Congratulations to you both." "When is the wedding?" "We have not set a date yet," Vincent said, his hand finding Fiona's. "But soon." Word spread quickly, as it always did in a small town. By the time they made it back to the ranch, they had been stopped half a dozen times by well-wishers offering congratulations. Some of the reactions were genuine, others tinged with surprise or disapproval, but Fiona found she did not care. She had Vincent, she had her ranch, and she had a future worth fighting for. That was all that mattered. Over the next few weeks, they settled into a new routine. Vincent moved his belongings into the main house, though they maintained separate rooms for propriety's sake until the wedding. They worked together to plan improvements to the ranch, using the money from the drive to purchase better breeding stock and make repairs that had been deferred for too long. Sam, Carlos, and Billy all agreed to stay on, and there was a sense of optimism about the place that had been missing for years. They set a date for the wedding in September, giving them time to get through the summer work and for Fiona to make arrangements for a proper ceremony. It would be simple by Boston standards, held at the small church in Desdemona with a reception at the ranch. But it would be theirs, and that was what mattered. As the summer progressed, Fiona discovered depths to Vincent she had only glimpsed before. He was endlessly patient with her as she learned the business side of ranching, teaching her about bloodlines and grazing rotation and market fluctuations. But he also listened to her ideas, implementing her suggestions about record-keeping and long-term planning with a respect that made her feel truly valued. And there was the physical side of their relationship, which deepened as they spent more time together. They were careful to maintain propriety in public, but in private, they allowed themselves to explore the attraction between them. It was never more than kissing and holding each other, saving the final step for marriage, but even that limited intimacy was more than Fiona had ever experienced. Vincent was tender and careful with her, always making sure she was comfortable, always putting her needs before his own. One evening in late August, they sat on the porch watching the sunset, his arm around her shoulders and her head resting against his chest. The ranch spread out before them, peaceful in the fading light, and Fiona felt a contentment so complete it was almost overwhelming. "Happy?" Vincent asked, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Incredibly," she said. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is real. That we pulled off that impossible drive, that we saved the ranch, that I found you." "I know what you mean," he said. "There have been so many times in my life when I felt like I was just drifting, waiting for something without knowing what. Then you stepped off that train and everything came into focus. You gave me purpose, Fiona. You gave me a home. We gave each other those things," she corrected. "That is what partnership means." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, then Fiona said, "I have been thinking about my father a lot lately, about what he would think of all this." "He would be proud of you," Vincent said with certainty. "Proud of how you saved his ranch, proud of the woman you have become." "Do you think he would approve of us?" She tilted her head to look up at him. "Honestly," Vincent considered the question seriously, "I think he would want you to be happy, and I think he trusted me enough to know I would take care of you. Beyond that, I think he would respect that we are building something together, that this is a partnership of equals." "I like to think so," Fiona said. "I like to think that somehow he knows and he is pleased." The wedding took place on a bright September morning, the air finally cooling from the brutal summer heat. The church was packed with people from town and neighboring ranches, all curious to see the woman who had made that legendary drive and the cowboy who had helped her do it. Fiona wore a simple white dress that she had made herself with help from Mrs. Chen, and she carried wildflowers that Vincent had picked for her that morning. As she walked down the aisle on Sam's arm, who had volunteered to give her away, she saw Vincent waiting at the altar and her breath caught. He wore new clothes purchased specially for the occasion, his dark hair neatly trimmed, his face clean-shaven. But it was his eyes that held her, the love and devotion so clear in them that she felt tears prick her own eyes. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to be partners in all things, to support and challenge each other, to build a life of meaning and purpose together. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her with a tenderness that made the congregation sigh, and Fiona felt like her heart might burst from happiness. The reception at the ranch was a lively affair, with music and dancing and more food than they could possibly need. People who had initially been skeptical about their unconventional arrangement seemed to warm up as they saw how happy the couple was. And by the end of the evening, even the most conservative matrons were offering their blessings. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Fiona and Vincent stole away to the porch, seeking a moment of quiet. They stood at the railing, his arms wrapped around her from behind, both of them looking out at the land they would build their future on. "Mrs. Eldridge," Vincent said, testing the name. "How does it feel?" "Perfect," she said, leaning back against him. "Everything about this day has been perfect." "It is only going to get better," he promised. "We have so much ahead of us, so much to look forward to." He was right. Over the next few years, they built the ranch into one of the most successful operations in the area. Vincent's skill with cattle and Fiona's head for business proved to be an unbeatable combination. They expanded gradually, always building on solid foundations, never overextending themselves the way her father had. They treated their hands fairly, paying good wages and fostering loyalty, and developed a reputation for honest dealing that brought them respect throughout Texas. But more than the professional success, they built a life rich in love and partnership. They worked side by side during the day and fell into each other's arms at night, their physical relationship as satisfying and passionate as Fiona could have hoped. Vincent was a generous and attentive lover, and Fiona discovered a sensuality in herself that she had never suspected. In the spring of 1880, Fiona discovered she was pregnant. She told Vincent one evening as they were getting ready for bed, and he responded by picking her up and spinning her around despite her laughing protests. "We are having a baby," he kept saying, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to be parents." "Yes," she said, cupping his face in her hands. "We are. Are you happy?" "Happy does not even begin to cover it," he said. "Fiona, you have given me everything. A home, a purpose, love, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive." Their son was born in December of that year, a healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's determined expression. They named him Thomas, after Fiona's father, and watching Vincent hold his son for the first time, so gentle and careful, Fiona felt her love for him deepen even further. Parenthood brought new challenges and joys. Thomas was an active, curious child who seemed determined to explore every inch of the ranch as soon as he could walk. Vincent proved to be a wonderful father, patient and playful, teaching his son about the land and animals with the same care he had shown Fiona years before. 2 years later, they had a daughter they named Grace, and their family felt complete. Grace had her mother's coloring and her father's smile, and she wrapped everyone around her tiny finger from the moment she was born. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch continued to prosper, the children grew healthy and strong, and Fiona and Vincent's partnership only deepened with time. They still worked together, making decisions jointly, supporting each other through challenges and celebrating successes together. One evening in the summer of 1885, they sat on the porch they had rebuilt and expanded, watching Thomas chase fireflies while Grace toddled after him. Vincent's arm was around Fiona's shoulders, and she leaned into him with the ease of long familiarity. "You remember that first day?" she asked. "When I stepped off the train and everything seemed hopeless." "I remember," Vincent said. "I remember thinking you looked like you were holding yourself together through sheer force of will." "I was," she admitted. "I had no idea what I was going to do, how I was going to save the ranch. I felt so lost and alone. And now," he pressed a kiss to her temple, "now I feel like the luckiest woman alive," she said. "I have a partner I love and respect, children who fill my days with joy, and work that gives me purpose. Sometimes I think about that scared girl on the platform, and I wish I could tell her that everything was going to be all right, that something wonderful was waiting just around the corner." "You asked me about hope once," Vincent said softly. "Do you remember? That night before we went into the Breaks country." "I remember," Fiona said. "You said hope is what brought you to me." "It did," he confirmed. "And it still does every single day. Hope that we will have many more years together. Hope that our children will grow up strong and happy. Hope that what we are building will last and mean something. You taught me that hope is not just wishful thinking. It is active belief paired with hard work and determination. It is choosing to fight for what matters even when the odds seem impossible." Fiona turned in his arms so she could look at him properly. After all these years, he still had the power to make her heart race with just a look. "I love you," she said. "More now than even on the day we married, and I did not think that was possible." "I love you too," he said. "You are my heart, my home, my hope. Everything good in my life started the day you walked into it." They kissed as the sun set over the Texas hills, their children's laughter floating on the evening air, and Fiona thought about how far they had come from that desperate spring when everything had seemed lost. They had taken a gamble, fought against impossible odds, and won not just the ranch but a life beyond anything she could have dreamed. The years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and milestones. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful young man who loved the land as much as his father did. Grace proved to have her mother's head for business, and a fierce independence that promised interesting times ahead. In 1888, Fiona discovered she was pregnant again, a surprise but a welcome one, and they welcomed another son they named Samuel after the man who had been such a loyal friend and employee for so many years. The ranch itself became a model for the region, with other ranchers seeking Vincent's advice on breeding and management. Fiona became known for her progressive attitudes toward women's education and employment, using her success as proof that women could manage business affairs as competently as men. Together, they helped modernize ranching practices in the area, introducing new techniques while respecting the old wisdom that had served previous generations well. But through all the growth and change, the core of their relationship remained the same. They were partners, best friends, lovers, co-parents, each supporting and challenging the other to be better. They disagreed sometimes, even argued on occasion, but they never lost sight of the respect and love that formed the foundation of everything they had built. In the autumn of 1890, they celebrated their 12th wedding anniversary with a party at the ranch. Friends and family came from all over, and as Fiona looked around at the crowd, at the children running through the yard, at the prosperity and happiness that surrounded them, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Later that night, after everyone had left and the children were asleep, she and Vincent took a walk under the stars. It was something they tried to do regularly, carving out time just for the two of them amid the busy demands of ranch and family life. 12 years, Fiona said, taking his hand. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together. I prefer the latter, Vincent said. I cannot really remember what life was like before you. I mean, I remember the facts of it, but the feeling is gone. You are so much a part of me now that I cannot imagine being separate. That is how I feel too, she said. You know what I was thinking about today? That moment when you told me hope is what brought you to me. How that one statement changed everything, gave me a reason to believe we could save the ranch. It was true then, and it is true now, Vincent said. Every good thing in my life stems from that hope, from the choice to believe in something better and work toward it. They stopped walking and turned to face each other, the moonlight painting everything silver. Even after 12 years and 3 children and countless shared experiences, Fiona felt the same flutter in her chest when he looked at her like that, like she was the most precious thing in his world. I would do it all again, she said softly. Every hard moment, every challenge, every fear, I would go through all of it again to end up right here with you. As would I, Vincent said, without hesitation or regret. You are my everything, Fiona, my past, my present, and my future. He kissed her then, sweet and deep, a kiss that held 12 years of love and partnership and shared dreams. When they finally pulled apart, both smiling, they turned and walked back toward the house hand in hand. The lights were on inside, warm and welcoming, and smoke curled from the chimney into the night sky. This was home, built not just with lumber and stone but with love and determination and hope. As they climbed the porch steps together, Fiona sent up a silent thank you to whatever force had brought them together, to the hope that had sustained them through impossible challenges, to the love that had transformed 2 lonely people into a family. Inside, the house was quiet, the children sleeping peacefully in their beds. Fiona and Vincent checked on each of them, tucking in blankets and pressing soft kisses to foreheads. Then they retired to their own room, the space they had shared for years, intimate and familiar. As they lay in bed together, Fiona's head resting on Vincent's chest and his arms wrapped around her, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that desperate day on the train platform to this moment of perfect contentment, it had been an incredible ride. There had been hardship and fear, yes, but also joy and love and achievement beyond measure. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent murmured, his hand stroking her hair. "Everything," she said. "The past, the present, the future. How grateful I am for all of it." "Me too," he said. "Though I am particularly grateful for the present moment. Having you here in my arms, knowing our children are safe and happy, feeling this content. It does not get much better than this." "No," Fiona agreed, pressing a kiss to his chest. "It really does not." They drifted off to sleep like that, wrapped around each other, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together. And that was all they needed. The years continued their steady march, bringing changes both welcome and bittersweet. In 1895, Thomas left for college in Austin, the first of their children to pursue higher education. It was a proud moment, but also a difficult one, watching their eldest set off on his own path. Grace, at 13, had developed into a formidable young woman with strong opinions about women's suffrage and social reform. And Samuel, at 7, was showing early signs of having his father's gift with animals and his mother's quick mind. Vincent and Fiona adapted to each phase of parenthood with the same partnership that characterized everything they did. They supported their children's dreams while providing guidance, encouraged independence while offering a safe harbor to return to. Their parenting philosophy, like their business philosophy, was built on respect, communication, and the fundamental belief that everyone had value and potential. The ranch continued to thrive under their joint management. They had expanded to over 1,000 acres, running quality cattle and breeding horses that were sought after throughout Texas. They employed a dozen hands year-round, more during busy seasons, and had a reputation as fair and decent employers. Several of their long-term employees had gone on to start their own operations with knowledge and sometimes financial backing from the Eldridges. In their personal life, Vincent and Fiona's relationship had only deepened with time. They still made each other laugh, still found joy in each other's company, still came together with passion and tenderness. The physical intimacy between them remained strong, a source of pleasure and connection that enriched their partnership. They had learned each other so thoroughly over the years that they could communicate with just a glance, anticipate each other's needs almost before they were expressed. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1899, they decided to take a trip, just the two of them, leaving the children with Sam and his wife. They traveled to San Antonio, staying in a nice hotel and spending a few days simply enjoying each other's company away from the demands of ranch and family. One evening, as they walked along the river with the sun setting in shades of orange and pink, Vincent pulled Fiona into a quiet alcove and took both her hands in his. 20 years, he said, his voice full of emotion. 20 years since you took a chance on a cowboy with nothing to offer but hope and hard work. You had everything to offer, Fiona corrected. You just did not realize it yet, and I did not take a chance on you. I made the best decision of my life. As did I, Vincent said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. I know we have been married for 20 years, that we have built a life and raised children and achieved more than I ever dreamed possible. But I wanted to mark this anniversary with something special. He opened the box to reveal a ring, a beautiful piece with a diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the fading light. "This is to replace that first ring I bought you," he said. "The one I got with my savings, which was nice but not what you deserved. This one is better, and it represents everything we have built together. Will you wear it?" Tears filled Fiona's eyes as he slipped it onto her finger next to her wedding band. "It is beautiful," she said. "But Vincent, that first ring was perfect. It represented a man with limited means but unlimited heart, and I treasured it for that. This one is lovely, but you did not need to replace it." "I know," he said, "but I wanted to. I wanted you to have something that reflects how precious you are to me, how much you mean. You have given me everything, Fiona. You saved me from a life of drifting and gave me purpose and family and love beyond measure. This ring is just a symbol, but maybe sometimes symbols matter." She kissed him then, there in the alcove with the river flowing past and the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dark. After 20 years, his kiss still had the power to make her knees weak, still filled her with warmth and desire and deep, abiding love. "I love you," she whispered against his lips, "more than words could ever express. You are my partner, my best friend, my great love. These 20 years have been the best of my life, and I look forward to 20 more and 20 after that." "As do I," Vincent said. "As do I." They returned to the ranch a few days later, rejuvenated and even more connected than before. The children had managed fine in their absence, and life quickly returned to its normal rhythm. But Fiona found herself thinking often about that moment by the river, about the ring on her finger and what it represented. Not just Vincent's love, which she had never doubted, but the journey they had taken together from those desperate early days to this place of security and happiness. She thought about the choice she had made to fight for the ranch, instead of simply accepting defeat. She thought about the risks they had taken, the long days and nights on the trail, the fear and exhaustion and determination. And she thought about how all of it had been worth it, had led them to this life they had built together. Time moved on, as it always does. Thomas graduated from college and returned to the ranch, bringing with him new ideas about agricultural practices and business management. He met a young woman named Elizabeth at a town social, and Fiona and Vincent found themselves planning a wedding much more elaborate than their own had been. Grace went off to college herself, determined to study law despite the barriers facing women in that field. Samuel was growing like a weed, already taller than his mother and well on his way to matching his father's height. Through all these changes, Vincent and Fiona remained the constants in each other's lives. They adapted to becoming parents of adults, learning to step back and let their children make their own choices while still offering support and guidance when requested. They continued to run the ranch together, though they began gradually transitioning more responsibility to Thomas as he showed himself capable and interested. In the summer of 1903, they became grandparents for the first time when Thomas and Elizabeth welcomed a daughter. Holding that tiny baby, seeing the wonder on Vincent's face as he cradled his granddaughter, Fiona felt the circle of life turning in the most beautiful way. This child would grow up on the ranch they had saved, would learn the values and skills they had worked so hard to instill, would be part of the legacy they were building. One evening that fall, after the day's work was done and they had returned from visiting Thomas and his family, Fiona and Vincent sat on their porch watching the sunset. It was something they had done countless times over the years, but it never lost its appeal. There was something peaceful about marking the end of the day together, reflecting on what had been accomplished and planning for what came next. "You ever think about that first conversation we had?" Fiona asked. "When you told me about the plan to save the ranch?" "Sometimes," Vincent said. "I remember thinking you would probably say no, that it sounded too crazy, too impossible, but you said yes, and that changed everything. You gave me hope," Fiona said simply, "when I had none left. You showed me that impossible things could be accomplished with hard work and determination and faith. That lesson has served me well over the years, not just in ranching but in all aspects of life." "We taught each other," Vincent said. "You taught me about resilience and courage. You taught me that partnership means trusting someone else with your dreams and vulnerabilities. You taught me how to love fully and without reservation." Fiona took his hand, lacing their fingers together. After 25 years of marriage, this gesture was as natural as breathing, but it still brought her comfort and connection. "I have been thinking," she said, "about passing the ranch to Thomas. Not right away, but in the next few years. He is ready for it, and I think we have earned a chance to slow down a bit, enjoy our grandchildren, maybe do some traveling." Vincent looked surprised. "Are you sure? The ranch has been your whole life." "No," Fiona corrected gently. "You have been my whole life. The ranch is important, but it is not everything. And I think it is time to let the next generation take over while we enjoy the fruits of our labor. We worked so hard to save it and build it up. Now let us enjoy what we created." Vincent considered this, then nodded slowly. "You might be right. Thomas is capable, and he loves the land as much as we do. And the idea of having more time with you, of being able to wake up in the morning and decide to do something just because we want to rather than because it needs doing, that sounds pretty appealing." They began the transition gradually, teaching Thomas everything he needed to know about the financial and operational aspects he had not yet mastered. By 1905, the ranch was fully in his hands, with Vincent and Fiona maintaining an advisory role but no longer responsible for day-to-day operations. The freedom was strange at first. After decades of constant work, of getting up before dawn and falling into bed exhausted, of always having something that needed doing, they had to learn how to simply be. But they adapted, finding new rhythms and pleasures. They traveled some, visiting places Fiona had once dreamed of seeing. They spent long hours with their grandchildren, passing on stories and skills. They took up hobbies they had never had time for before. And they enjoyed each other's company, rediscovering the simple pleasure of spending time together without the pressure of work hanging over them. In the spring of 1908, on a morning that dawned clear and beautiful, Vincent suggested they go for a ride out to the place where they had first talked about hope, where he had laid out the plan to save the ranch all those years ago. Fiona agreed readily, always happy to revisit the places that held meaning for them. They rode out together, both still capable riders despite their advancing years. When they reached the spot, a rise overlooking the ranch with a view that stretched for miles, they dismounted and stood together looking out over the land. "You remember what you said to me that night?" Fiona asked. "About hope." "I said that I believed in hope, that without it I would still be that angry kid going nowhere," Vincent replied. "And I said hope is what brought me to you." "It brought us to each other," Fiona said. "And from that hope, look what we built. A successful ranch, yes, but more than that. A family, a legacy, a life full of meaning and purpose and love, all from choosing to hope even when circumstances seemed hopeless." Vincent pulled her into his arms, and they stood there on that hill with the morning sun warming their faces and the ranch spread out below them. This was where it had all started, with a desperate woman and a hopeful man deciding to fight for something worth saving. And in fighting for the ranch, they had found each other and built something even more valuable. "I would not change a single thing," Vincent said softly. "Every challenge, every hardship, every moment of fear and doubt, they were all worth it to end up here with you." "Nor would I," Fiona agreed. "You once asked me if I believed in hope. I did not have a good answer then, but I do now. Hope is what we make it, what we choose to fight for." It is not passive wishing but active faith. And yes, I believe in it absolutely, because hope brought me to you, and you are the best thing that ever happened to me." They kissed there on that windswept hill. Two people who had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious, who had built a life and a love that would endure beyond their own years. The morning stretched ahead of them, full of possibility, and they rode back to the ranch hand in hand, knowing that whatever time they had left would be spent together, just as it should be. The years that followed were gentle ones, marked by family gatherings and quiet evenings, by the joy of watching grandchildren grow, and the satisfaction of seeing the ranch continue to prosper under Thomas's management. Grace eventually became a lawyer, one of the first women to pass the bar in Texas, and they could not have been prouder. Samuel married and started his own ranching operation with knowledge and some capital from his parents. Vincent and Fiona grew old together with grace and dignity, their love deepening even as their bodies slowed. They remained best friends and passionate partners, finding joy in simple things like morning coffee on the porch or an evening walk under the stars. They told their stories to their grandchildren, passing on the lessons they had learned and the values they held dear. On their 50th wedding anniversary in 1929, their children and grandchildren threw them a huge party at the ranch. People came from all over, old friends and family, to celebrate the couple who had become something of a legend in the area. As Fiona looked around at the crowd, at the faces of people she loved, at the ranch that had been saved and transformed into something even better than it had been, she felt a profound sense of satisfaction and completion. That night, after everyone had left and they were alone in their room, Vincent pulled Fiona close and simply held her. No words were needed. After 50 years, they understood each other too well for words to be necessary. They had lived a full life, accomplished more than either could have dreamed, and loved each other through every moment of it. "Thank you," Fiona whispered into the darkness, "for everything. For the hope you gave me, for the life we built, for loving me so completely." "Thank you," Vincent replied, "for choosing me, for being my partner, for making every day an adventure. I love you more now than I ever have, and I did not think that was possible." They fell asleep that way, wrapped in each other's arms as they had been countless nights before, secure and content. It was not a dramatic ending or a tragic one, just two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. In the years that came after, when their children and grandchildren told their story, they always came back to that central truth. Hope is what brought them together, and hope is what sustained them through every challenge. It was a simple message, but a powerful one, and it echoed through the generations that followed, a legacy more valuable than any amount of land or cattle. The ranch still stands today, passed down through the generations, a testament to what two people can accomplish when they refuse to give up, when they choose to hope even in the darkest moments. And on quiet evenings, when the sun sets over the Texas hills painting everything gold and rose, it is easy to imagine two figures standing on the porch hand in hand, looking out over the land they saved and the life they built, still together even after all these years, their love as enduring as the land itself. This is the story of Vincent Eldridge and Fiona Turner, of hope and determination, of a love that changed everything. It is a story about taking risks and working hard and refusing to accept defeat. But most of all, it is a story about the power of hope, about how believing in something better and being willing to fight for it can transform not just circumstances but lives. They lived fully and loved deeply, and when they finally passed, within months of each other as so many long married couples do, They left behind a legacy that extended far beyond the ranch. They left children and grandchildren who knew what it meant to work hard and love well. They left friends and community members whose lives they had touched in countless ways. And they left a story that would be told for generations, inspiring others to find their own hope, to take their own risks, to build their own impossible dreams. In the end, that is what hope really is. The belief that something better is possible, combined with the courage to reach for it. Vincent and Fiona embodied that truth, lived it every day of their long lives together. They proved that with hope, with love, with determination and hard work, any challenge can be overcome, any dream can be achieved. And so their story ends not with sadness but with celebration, with gratitude for a life well lived and a love that conquered all. Hope is what brought them together, and hope is what they left behind. A gift to all who came after them, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, even when everything seems lost, there is always reason to hope, always reason to fight, always reason to believe in the possibility of something better. Their grandchildren still gather at the ranch on special occasions, bringing their own children to run through the same fields where Vincent and Fiona once worked so hard to gather wild cattle. They tell the story of that impossible drive, of the woman who refused to give up and the man who gave her hope. And in the telling, the story lives on, inspiring new generations to face their own challenges with courage and determination. The ranch itself remains a working operation, modernized but still recognizable as the place Vincent and Fiona built together. The original house still stands, carefully maintained, with the porch where they spent so many evenings watching the sunset. In the barn, there is a plaque commemorating that legendary drive in 1878, the one that saved everything and brought two people together. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the light is just right, it is almost possible to feel their presence, to sense the love and hope and determination that saturated every inch of this land. They are gone but not forgotten, their story a permanent part of the place they saved, the family they built, the legacy they left. This is how love stories should end, not with tragedy or separation, but with a life fully lived, with children and grandchildren carrying on the work, with love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. Vincent and Fiona found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, built something beautiful against impossible odds, and loved each other with a depth and constancy that inspired everyone who knew them. Hope brought them together, love sustained them, and their story lives on, a testament to the power of choosing to believe in something better, of refusing to give up even when everything seems lost, of finding in each other the strength to accomplish the impossible. They were partners in every sense of the word, building a life together that was richer and more meaningful than either could have achieved alone. And in the end, that is the real lesson of their story, that we are stronger together than apart, that love and hope can overcome any obstacle, that the impossible becomes possible when two people commit to facing it side by side. Vincent and Fiona proved this truth every day of their lives together, and their legacy continues to inspire, a beacon of hope for all who face their own impossible challenges. They lived, they loved, they built something lasting, and they did it together. What more could anyone ask from a life? What better ending could any story have? Their journey from that desperate day on the train platform to a lifetime of partnership and love is a reminder that sometimes the best things come from the worst situations, that hope can be found even in the darkest moments, and that love, true love, can conquer all. This is their story, complete and whole, a life lived fully from beginning to end. They faced their challenges, achieved their dreams, raised their family, and loved each other through it all. And now, their work done and their legacy secured, they rest together, forever partners, forever bound by the hope that brought them together and the love that sustained them through 50 years of marriage and a lifetime of partnership. The sun sets over the Texas hills one final time in their story, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and the ranch stands strong beneath it, a testament to what they built, a monument to their love, a reminder that hope and determination can overcome any obstacle. Their story is complete, their ending happy, their legacy assured. Vincent and Fiona Eldridge lived and loved well, and their memory will endure for generations to come, inspiring others to find their own hope, their own love, their own impossible dreams. And that truly is the end of their story, not with sadness or regret, but with satisfaction and joy, with a life fully lived and a love that lasted forever. Hope brought them together, and love carried them through. And now their story stands as proof that even the most impossible dreams can come true when two people refuse to give up, when they choose to hope, when they commit to building something beautiful together. This is their legacy, their gift to the future, their story complete.